Hi, I just want to share some information here, and I'm going to be employing juxtaposition in order to highlight the absolute idiocy and hypocrisy of what we are living in at the moment, which apparently is human intelligence. We're being governed by apparently an alleged intelligence. So here we have Fukushima, and these are just a few of the present videos available of Fukushima. So, you know, we've got Dana Daneford, who's done some absolutely brilliant work exposing the issues of Fukushima, and also Kevin Blanch, and there's also H. Thomas Ackerman. I don't think any of his videos are featured here. Even David Icke has covered it. You know, there's quite a lot of people who have been covering this issue from the start, and it has mostly been down to the alternative media to keep the public updated and informed about what is actually happening. And don't forget, there's also Global Research, alternative news provider, who've produced some absolutely brilliant articles, you know, leaving us in no uncertain terms about the facts of what is going on. We are talking about a major nuclear catastrophe that our planet is experiencing right now and suffering from. We have Organic Slant, who regularly shares information and videos showing us what's happening there. And the disturbing thing is how the mainstream media just totally are ignoring this as a trivial, you know, it's as if it's just a trivial thing. And, you know, Japan to release millions of tons of radioactive water. Well, this has been going on since 2011, from when the plant first went into total meltdown, 3 nuclear reactors. And I think one of the reactors blew up, and at least one fuel pool blew up. So, you know, we've got all that, you know, Japan's been contaminated with that. And it's all trivialised, even though we are witnessing the mass animal die-offs. We're witnessing the impact on the Pacific Ocean. We're witnessing the impact on the children, especially of Japan, who are developing higher rates, incidence of thyroid cancer now. But, you know, we'll ignore it, and instead we'll focus on what's going on with Trump, which I do feel that guy has been put in the position where he is for exactly that purpose, as a major distraction from all the very real and terrible issues that people are facing. And recently I made a video, it's titled Crocodile Tears, and it's about the media response to what's been happening with the immigrant children, which does, you know, that does warrant tears. It's absolutely despicable and disgusting. But in that video I have juxtaposed the emotion that the media have invited and facilitated on that issue. I've juxtaposed it against the issue of parents, and mostly black families, but I'm not saying it's entirely black families, but mostly black families who have, for some reason, usually through the redundancy, have been laid off work, they've lost the job, their home's under threat now, they're facing threat of eviction. As soon as that happens, straight away the child protection authorities are informed. Don't forget, this is a private corporate child care organisation, so they rely entirely on public funds, okay? So you've got the ridiculous situation, and actually evil situation, and it is equally as evil as what is happening to the immigrant children. Alright, the immigrant children are suffering that they are being housed in tent cities and on military bases and things like this, but at the same time, it, you know, for the child, the main problem is being separated from the parent. At least siblings are being kept together but even that is denigrated because they're not allowed to hug, apparently. You know, one employee at one of those centres where the immigrant children are being kept, he walked out of his job because he was being asked to separate siblings who were hugging each other for comfort after being removed from their parents. And so it is a despicable situation, but like I say, when you juxtapose it against the fact also that parents who are being made poor by exactly the same corporate capitalist system that's been vamping off them for years and that has destroyed their economy and their industry and their jobs, that then they're going to have the children removed by a state that then is quite happy to pay hundreds of pounds per week to strangers for each one of the children those strangers look after, and often the siblings are separated. So the children all go to different foster carers. That happens quite regularly. And so what mentality is working there? What kind of a society will remove children from parents who are facing eviction because they've lost their job, because they're too poor to pay their rent? There's no other issues with these children. It isn't that they're suffering neglect, but the idea is that they're at risk now because they're facing homelessness. So before that even happens, we'll remove the children. This is happening in America. So the state isn't prepared to invest in the American family, who through no fault of their own are victims of this economic horror, terrorism, that has been inflicted on their nation, and in fact every nation on the planet, by criminal bankers. So instead of giving them hundreds of pounds a week that would look after all their children, okay, they would rather give, American state would rather give that money to people who want to break families apart and actually put children at greater risk in the care system. Because when you look at the statistics, statistically you could say that children in care are actually more at risk, a lot of them, especially the ones that have been taken from parents simply because they've been facing eviction, they are actually placed at a higher risk in the care system than they were in the family home with loving mum, loving hard-working mum and dad, or just mum or just dad, than they are in the care system. They are at greater risk in the care system. That is abominable, because each of those children, whether they're an immigrant child or a migrant child, each of those children separated from their family, from their loving family, who have committed the crime of being poor. The levels of bereavement that those children feel is an abuse of the child. It severely damages them. It undermines their inner sense of self. You're talking about children that have been torn away from their parents, their communities, their grandparents, their siblings, their cousins, their schools, and sent to where? And often permanently, and in that video I share the story of one lady whose children were taken off her solely on the grounds that she was facing being evicted from her home. Actually, she didn't end up getting evicted, but they took the children, and she's never been able to get them back. And you're talking about children, there were no other issues other than she was facing eviction. Her eldest child was a straight A student, but none of them she's been able to get back, because she was told she was too poor to look after them. Her poverty is a risk to her children. But so the remedy then, like I say, pay what amounts to thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars per year per child to strangers, but don't give anything to her to help. Just a fraction of what they pay out for one child. She could have looked after her whole family on that. She would probably have to do 2 jobs to earn the amount of money that the state is prepared to pay to private private corporate childcare providers, that would have been what they'll pay for one child. That would have covered her wage probably twice over. So, you know, these are the levels of hypocrisy that we're dealing with. So that juxtaposition reveals the hypocrisy that's going on here, doesn't it? Because you don't see the corporate mainstream media inviting mass tears and emotion over what's happening to American families via economic terrorism. The same media that ignores Fukushima and tries to make light of it all, that would prefer to focus on the latest shenanigans of the Trump administration, you know, on really trivialities of what people, you know, the lawful suspicion against that man, what is actually being addressed right now are trivialities compared to very much more serious allegations that have been made against him. But, you know, instead we'll focus on, you know, what's gone off with Stormy Daniels. And like I say, I do feel that is why he's there. Now, in that video that I've made, Crocodile Tears, I do use some quite strong language, and you know, a lot of people don't like Kevin Blanch because he uses very strong language as well. Apparently, he's swearing, okay, and he's offensive, and I'm offensive, okay, because I will call people who abuse humanity, abuse our children, abuse our planet, I call them fuckers, okay, and I tell them to fuck off. Now, apparently, that is abusive language. I'm swearing. It's a blasphemy. And this judgment, and that is exactly why I've started using that language, that I use that language. I take my full rights of freedom of speech and expression to call a spade, okay, and to basically the equivalent of what throwing a rock at a huge tank that wants to destroy my home. So I'll throw a rock at it, but nobody's going to say anything about the tank. Instead, they're all going to point fingers at me because as a terrorist, because I've thrown a stone at a tank, and that's what my language amounts to. That's what Kevin Blanch's language amounts to. Okay, he's throwing a stone at a great big nuclear power that could annihilate his whole country, that is in the process of annihilating the life of our Pacific Ocean. So that means our children's heritage has been destroyed and vandalised by people who claim to be intelligent. So intelligent, in fact, they should rule us. We should live by according to their dictates. This is a consciousness, okay, that has legally defined our children as minor human beings. Now, understand the letter of the law, okay, because the wording of the law is very important. And that means that our children are legally defined as unimportant, lesser, insignificant, trivial human beings. Okay? That means that any crimes against them are a minor concern, a triviality. Any risks that they might face by nuclear power, that's also a minor, trivial concern. So, are you surprised to be finding that, the government of America systematically separates children from parents at the border, of immigrant parents arriving at the border, and, you know, puts them in such terrible conditions, even houses them in cages, and actually won't even allow them to hug, okay? Are we surprised at the hypocrisy of a mainstream media that will devote how many hours of attention onto the plight of those children, but that media barely gives a mention, and maybe just now and again, certainly they don't devote weeks and weeks and weeks of attention onto the issue of impoverished families having their children removed from them, the children they genuinely love, children who genuinely love those parents. That's okay. you can take the children away from them, and you can pay the corporate care providers massive amounts of money. In fact, the kind of sums of money that this parent could not even dream of earning. Okay? I mean, in Britain, for example, every cared for child, G4S, a private corporation, was running children's homes, and there's other ones similar, and they were receiving £200,000 a year plus for every single child in their care. £200,000 a year for each child. Okay, children that are taken from parents, often because the parents are poor, who would be lucky if they even earned £20,000 a year. And that's the same in America. It's the same thing going on, that these private care providers, none of the Republicans who are constantly moaning about food stamps and welfare and social security and child benefit and housing benefit, okay, that they're constantly moaning and griping about the absolute pittance that these people are receiving, even to look after children, but they're quite happy to witness hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions being paid out to these corporate childcare providers. They don't mind that. They're quite happy. That's okay for them to live off welfare. It's okay for a private childcare corporation to live off government handouts, okay, and actually live very nice, comfortable lives for themselves. But meanwhile, the families that have been the children have been taken off because the families become poor. But the state can't give anything to keep the family together. So you've got a nation that is refusing to invest in the family. They're refusing to invest in American families. So how do you expect them to invest in helping and treating immigrant families with any more, decency? Everything is relative. And the consciousness that will do that, the consciousness that would describe our children as a minor, which is a blasphemy, that is a blasphemy. You see, that's the secret, isn't it? It's a secret blasphemy, because people don't recognise it as blasphemy. People will say that he's committing blasphemy for swearing about Fukushima, okay, for using the F word in describing his reaction, in sharing his reaction to Fukushima. He's using the F word. He's guilty of blasphemy. But, a government minister, a law system, a court of law describing our children as minor, inferior, unimportant, lesser, trivial, insignificant human beings. And that's not a blasphemy. So, I invite the judgments. Send the judgments to me. I'm a blasphemer. Sorry, they are going right back to your heads, you judges out there. Because that is what we're living under. We're living under judgments. Judgments against women, judgments against children, judgments against gays, judgments against black people, judgments against immigrants, against Muslims, against Jews. You name it, the judgments are there. And we need to remove ourselves from these judgments that are there solely for the purpose of division, because while everybody's been, battling it out on one level or another in the social divisions, this is what's been going on. We've got the Crown of England presently on its puppet Queen Elizabeth II, and, next minute they want to, dump it on one of her children or grandchildren, this sparkly crown that apparently represents God, because she's that crown is head of the Church of England. The crown is head of our legal system. It's a crown that is blasphemous. It is actually supports blasphemy against our humanity. It's a crown that judged native peoples inferior and heathen, and gave itself the right to take their lands and control them and call them slaves. Now, the Crown is one of the biggest profiteers from the uranium mining and nuclear power, because the Crown has ultimate control over the colonies, now known as the Commonwealth, the Crown retains rights to extract and profit from all the mineral resources of those Commonwealth lands. And that does include uranium mines. The Queen has become a trillionaire on the strength of it, okay? The Crown, because it's all this money goes to the Crown. It's the Crown. The Crown is a corporate entity. And so that same Crown that has judged our children minors imposed this nuclear power on us. And, you know, again, we see what Jesus told us, as you give, so shall you receive, coming back to us time and time and time again. So what did this world give to Japan? It gave them 2 nuclear bombs, didn't it? The 2 atomic bombs that abominably just instantly incinerated thousands of men, women and children in Japan. And from that day on, Japan has been under full, total control of American corporate interests and global banking corporate interests. That's why the little tiny island of Japan has 53 nuclear power plants on it, and each of them with 2 or more nuclear reactors. 53. That's not by the will of the Japanese people. It gets sold to the people of like, oh look, jobs, look, there's jobs. You know, what? There's always going to be jobs for humanity to do. It doesn't mean that we have to do jobs that put our children's lives at risk, that put our planet at risk, does it? Are there no ethical jobs? Is there no ethical form of employment that this world, the powers of this world could invest in? Like, for example, hemp production, eco-friendly, that could produce all our needs, even provide oil for us. But no, we can't invest in that. We can't invest in the family. Instead, we invest in breaking up the family. We invest in putting the family at risk from serious pollutants. We invest in division and war and strife and hate and xenophobia and fear and insecurity. And that's what America invests in South America. And that is why it does its best to destabilise any advances, social advances that these countries make, that the South American nations make, by way of, you know, electing reasonable people into power that aren't there just to exploit and vamp off the workforce, that aren't going to open the workforce up to total exploitation by some American corporation. Oh, immediately they're crushed. They have to be crushed. So America is constantly stirring up strife in South America. People are then fleeing from that to America, and then the Americans are saying, oh no, we don't want them in here, they're all criminals. Well, if you don't want mass migration into your land, you don't want masses of people fleeing the abject poverty and oppression that America has insisted they should be subject to, then if you don't want that, then maybe America needs to change its policies and start getting a bit humane and start supporting the democratically elected leaders instead of doing everything they can to, help create coups against them, like they've done with Venezuela and countless, actually, countries in South America that they've constantly destabilised, and that then does produce mass immigration. And, we know why these nuclear power plants are so important, because you can't make a nuclear bomb without a nuclear power station. You need the reactors to make a nuclear weapon. And the depleted uranium that's on these bunker busting bombs, and even bullets tipped with depleted uranium, are causing serious deformities now in people of Iraq. It's causing cancer, it's causing birth deformities. Children are being stillborn with terrible deformities as a direct result of the depleted uranium weapons that actually are illegal because they've never been through the Geneva Convention weapons review that could cite them as safe and as environmentally safe. We know they're not environmentally safe. It's that they are very dangerous and deadly, and they depleted uranium has a half-life, I think, of 500 billion years. Okay. Or is it 500 million? Does it make any difference? A half-life. Now, we can accept that. That isn't a blasphemy against us, is it? It's not a blasphemy against life, depleted uranium. What's happened to those children when you look at the deformities, that's not a blasphemy, is it? No, instead, you know, he's blaspheming for swearing, for saying the F word, because he's so upset and so deeply disturbed, and so many people are being so ignorant about it. People who have been born into a world in which they were judged minor as children, so they just subliminally accept it, and that's why crimes against children and risks against children are taken so lightly. And that's why it is only when humanity starts to accept that the child is actually VIP, or that they're the only VIPs on this planet, that is when people will no longer tolerate nuclear power. They won't tolerate families being evicted. They won't tolerate privatised childcare services being paid hundreds of pounds to look after each child in their care. No, they'll be investing in families. They'll be investing in decent education that raises people who understand how to be a parent, who understand how to have a relationship, who understand how to live lawfully in a lawful society. But how can a society be lawful that has judged our own species young as inferior and unimportant and trivial and insignificant? And this is what I mean about humanity, where you are so far down the line, and really, you know, you're not going to wake up. Sadly, a lot of you, it seems, but obviously I make my videos, and so do a lot of other people, hoping that it doesn't get to that point. But otherwise, you are going to find yourself up to your necks in the water, ready to drown. Because humanity right now are like the people on the Titanic. The ship is sinking. The rumours are flying around. People know, people have seen the damage. This ship's going to sink. But nobody's taking any notice of it. The rich people on the upper decks, they're all dancing in the ballroom, the glittery, sparkly ballroom. They're all dressed in their finery. They're enjoying their food. They're dancing, listening to the orchestra, which is playing along, and they're saying, oh, go away. We've been told this ship cannot sink. We have utmost faith. It's unsinkable. Don't be silly, go away. Well, I'm sorry. The Titanic is going to sink. It isn't unsinkable. It's sinking. And you're going to have to wake up. You're going to have to stop balking because you hear somebody say the word fuck in the face of absolute fuckers that have robbed our children of their rights. Okay? You're going to have to stop balking at gnats and swallowing the camel. You're going to have to refuse to swallow that camel. And the only way you're going to get that camel entirely removed off your plate is by standing up for your children's rights and accepting that our children are VIPs. And if you can shed tears, America, to such a degree over the immigrant children, and so you should, because it is disgusting what has been done to them, so the same exactly applies to the children of your own nation who are suffering economic terrorism that tears them away from their parents and their siblings. You are going to have to face reality, and we are, when we understand how important our children are, because they are the next generation, that is when you will refuse to allow this corporate, unrepayable, forever corporate debt to be dumped on them. You will refuse to accept nuclear power in its present form. There are ways of using nuclear power that aren't anywhere near as dangerous as what this stuff is, but this stuff is outrageous, and you've been prepared to swallow that outrage, but at the same time persecute people for using what you call foul language, when actually your whole legal system is based on foul language against our own children, against your own children who are described as minor and even illegitimate. Illegitimate. A child in this world can be illegitimate, but this is legitimate. And you wonder why people like myself get angry and start telling the hypocrites shedding their crocodile tears to fuck off. I'm sorry, you're totally upside down. And until you start listening, until you wake up and get active, I'm sorry, the ship is going to sink, and you will fuck off, humanity. You will. You'll fuck off into extinction. And really, if you can't stand up for your children's rights now, in the face of the juxtaposition that has revealed conclusively what is going on in this world and how our priorities are totally skewed with, if you can't accept that, then, you know, this species doesn't deserve to survive, and it certainly does not deserve children.